it's on, all right? You mind if I leave it on?
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Thank you. We will open up with item 4, and I will announce item 4, which is a public hearing. And prior to that, I will ask Rob Zarnitsky to start with any conversation. But tonight is a public hearing with the school committee participation relative to the town council's preliminary budget for the fiscal year 2018 and 2019 as adopted on March 19th, 2018. This public hearing will address all funds contained within the town council's preliminary budget. Before we open it up, I know Rob might have some comments, and if Kristen has some comments too, Dr. Stringfeld, I will welcome both of those.
Madam President, I just want to, I owe, I guess, you and the public a quick explanation of why we're starting late tonight. We, under your direction, wanted to make sure that we were giving everybody a full opportunity to address the issues that we know are coming before the council and the school committee tonight. We do have some rules that bind us in various ways, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't running afoul. As you know, this was a public hearing that was specifically noticed on the issue of the preliminary council budget for FY 2018 and 2019. This is not a hearing about the closure of any schools. The school budget and the preliminary budget passed by the council don't address funding for closures or the monies that would be generated by those closures. We've been trying to figure out a way to sort of stretch this meeting to allow for a more full discussion, because we know folks want to have that fuller discussion. We really just can't figure out how to get beyond the fact that this hearing is limited to the preliminary budget. So as we go through this meeting, it's really important that folks do keep this about the budgetary items and not sort of stretch into other non-budgetary issues. We do recognize that there's other opportunities and ways to have a conversation about the broader issue. It's just that this hearing, this forum, just can't be made to stretch as far as folks would like it to be stretched, I think. So with that, we'll share with you an overview of the budget. The public, of course, will be commenting here about the budget, and you know those comments can be made as broadly as possible. But we do ask that everybody keep it to the budget and what the budget recommendations are and what the impacts on the community are going to be.
Dr. Stringfield, do you have anything you'd like to add before we start?
Sorry, no, I think Mr. Zarnetsky covered it. Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to clarify. So I understand that these bodies can't engage in discussions specific to the facility study, but I just want to make it really clear to the audience that they absolutely can speak about anything, really, right, in a public hearing. I just think in this sort of day and age, politically, I wouldn't want folks to come out to the town council to voice concerns about things happening in town and feel like their voices were at all being squashed. So
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Make sure everyone knew that they could, in fact, speak about.
Madam President, through you.
Yeah, you know what? I want to hear from everybody because we're a community. That's the most important thing. And that's important to all of you that showed up tonight. It's important to us. It's important to our schools. And it's important to our teachers. So your voices can be heard. And I would like them to be heard. It's not an agenda item. This is specifically designated for the budget. But we as a council, once the budget hearing has closed, can add an agenda item. And if necessary, we will, so that we can allow the public to speak. Because you are here to say something. And it's our right and our respect to hear from you. So with that being said, we'll go on with the budget. And after the budget is discussed, we can move forward.
Very good. Trish, you want to take it from here? You got any overviews or?
We did receive some updated figures today from the assessor's office. So from where we were at on March 20th, we have a slight increase in the assessed value from 0.8 to 0.9%, so almost a 1% increase in assessed values, and which in turn brought the tax rate down from 1571 down to 1569, so that's a little bit of good news. I think we're pretty much done with most of that. We're just going to have slight increases, decreases, but nothing major that will impact where we're at right now. So we're looking at about $132 increase in the average homeowner's tax bill.
And as Patricia says, those numbers are up and down, but we are pretty much beyond the part of the process that's going to result in sort of wild shifts. We saw some big shifts earlier in the year. We're done with that. The process of going through the valuation is far enough along that while there may be some minor changes, we do not expect anything dramatic, and we should be looking at a tax rate of 116, an increase of 132. No, increase, tax dollars of increase of $132 per average household of $350,000.
Moving forward. How should we proceed from here? Is there any other?
You certainly can open the public hearing at this point, and again, I certainly don't want to be misunderstood as asserting that the public can't speak about anything they'd like to speak about. It's just a reminder that it really is about the budget. We had hoped that we could stretch the procedure a little wider and allow people to make more extended presentations. That's not going to be an option given the open meeting laws.
All right, at this point, do we have a discussion here at the table? Any questions before we open it up to the public? Does the public want to add anything? If you do, please come to the podium and state your name, and we'll talk about discussion items for the budget. Seeing none, any other questions here at the table? Okay.
I guess I have a couple. Looking over the proposed budget for 18-19, when I look at the 17-18 budget and then where we hope to be at the end of the budget, and I'm referring to the school budget at this point, I come up with about, without bonded debt, I come up with about $200,000 in less spending than was budgeted. So I wondered if that is available to reduce next year's budget.
I'm sorry, our anticipated year-end fiscal year, usually what happens at the end of the fiscal year, that $200,000 or whatever the surplus is, does revert back to our fund balance. And what we have done in previous years and also this year, in the last 2 years, we did budget $500,000 out of our fund balance to reduce the tax rate. Previous years, we were at the $400,000 mark, so in the past 2 years, with the decrease in the substantial revenue decrease, we have increased it by $100,000. And next year, we'll explore that again through the budget process. I get a little concerned if we were to elevate that, because it is considered a one-time revenue, and if we don't have the fund balance there, we will then have to make that money up some way. And with 2 more years of decrease in the state aid, I'd rather keep it at the level we currently have it at.
Okay, so to clarify, about 500 of the fund balance is used in the next year's budget? Is that what you? So when we add the capital improvements, it's about 405. So I guess your fund balance will be a little bit lower next year.
What I would like to do for next fiscal year, though it's still very early and speculative on my part, I would like to take that $500,000 that we have budgeted this year and drop it back to $400,000, or maybe $450,000, then finally down to $400,000.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Olin?
I have a question on specifically things like the funding formula. We have heard that we know that the funding formula reductions, as it stands today, is 2 years left in that adjustment. Do we have any indications of what it might look like after that?
I would hope that will level off a little bit. Hopefully, there's so many things that go into the funding formula as it relates to even poverty rates and things like that, and enrollment also. So, again, until we get to that point, it'll be really tough to speculate.
I think what I'm really thinking about is that we have those are numbers that will continually change, but the biggest chunk to our reduction has been to correct to what the theoretical good number is.
Correct. I don't anticipate seeing the $600,000 to $700,000 decrease in state aid.
For 2 more years.
For 2 more years, correct.
Will they then re-evaluate a formula that could hurt us again? That's what we have.
Yeah, we don't know that.
Is
Yeah.
there any indications that anybody's seen that that's a possibility?
No, I have not heard anything as of yet.
Any, Liz?
I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. Just that, as always, I appreciate all the work that went into this, especially Trish. I know how you are with numbers, and it's been great that you've been so spot on all these. I just wanted to say last year, when we were looking at the budget, I feel like we were in a really different place. And I feel like this year, we've really made some hard choices and had some difficult discussions that we maybe weren't willing to have a few years ago. And that's why when we approved the preliminary budget, I was in favor of the increased expenditure over the 2.5%. I feel like the school committee has really taken on some big projects this year with the vocational school at the high school and with the legacy study and the discussions and the partnerships that we've had. And I think that all the money that you're requesting and spending in your budget is really responsibly spent. I think it's important to note that we've only seen a 1% increase in expenditures for the school on the school committee side, and all of the increases come from revenue shortfall, really. And we see new things this year added to the budget that we didn't see last year, and to have those new things without seeing a huge increase in expenditures, I think, speaks to how hard everybody worked to make sure those numbers were down. So I'm grateful that we were able to work together through this process, and I'm proud of the budget we're putting forward.
Do we have any additional comments here at the table?
I just wanted to say that I recently went to a meeting with the Rhode Island Association of School Committees and the Rhode Island Department of Education on the funding formula, and I did bring to their attention rather emphatically about the fact that when the funding formula was implemented, transportation was not considered, and what a large percent of our budget it goes to transportation. And I don't know if it's going to do any good, but I've also been talking to our reps. They're well aware of my concerns about the fact that going forward, since the state requires us to transport children, and not that I think we shouldn't, I agree with that, absolutely, but that it should be part of the funding formula.
Thank you, Michelle.
And to follow up on that, last week I went with Representative Fogarty for a hearing on that topic to just kind of reiterate with the powers that be at the State House that it is a huge, huge burden on our community. $4 million is a lot of money. And to just kind of reiterate with them that not necessarily should they be paying for it, but to take it into account when they're figuring out the formula for us. So hopefully they'll listen.
I'm going to piggyback on that again. What some of the members of our community may not realize is that some of our urban districts in the state of Rhode Island do not transport their high school students, And so that makes a huge difference. That together with the number of miles of road that we have, and the fact that we're probably tied with Coventry for being the largest landmass, that's what drives our transportation budget so high. One of the other school committee members from another district asked me if I had misquoted the amount that we spend on transportation. I said, no, would you like to see it? It's right here. $4.1 million was.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to just add, sort of in defense of the core cities, I think they have a lot of other barriers that they're overcoming in educating students, so they might not bus their kids around, but they certainly have other expenses that we don't.
Thank you, Alicia. Do we have any other comments? Jonathan, would you like to come to the podium? Please state your name.
Jonathan Daly LaBelle. I'm just looking at the agenda, and it says pursuant to one of the Rhode Island general laws, public comment regarding subject matter not on the agenda but received during the public participation portion of a meeting shall be for informational purposes only. It may not be voted on except where necessary to address an unexpected occurrence, etc. So I'm not really sure where the issue is in having general conversation during the hearing.
What we had anticipated doing, Jonathan, once we closed the discussion on the budget, we were going to add to the agenda an item B for further discussion relative to any citizens' presentations to school committees, decision to close, any additional schools, Wakefield School, and we are going to welcome that tonight.
Madam President?
Take a vote on that tonight.
I'm sorry. Just prior to this meeting, I was in a teleconference with counsel for the school committees, for the school committee, and the school committee's rules are slightly different than the town council's meeting requirements. Under the open meetings law, the town council can add an item to the agenda. However, the school committee cannot participate because their rules do not allow them. The state statute does not allow them to add an item to the agenda. You'll note that there's an exception for except school committees in that provision. And their attorney suggests that if we were to take that road, they can't participate. They'd have to leave. So it is probably better that members of the public simply come up during the public hearing and try to keep comments about Wakefield related to the budget in some way, and I think we're in good shape.
There's no vote tonight,
There is no vote tonight.
so it's a public hearing. And, for the future, I know in the past, they will say other items of interest and concern. I mean, I'm hearing like there's no offense,
Nope,
none at all, but there's like a chill, that's being sent, in my opinion. And I think what I've heard in the past is a look that all the public officials, community members want to take like a multi-year look out into the future, and that multi-year look can inform how people feel about this year's budget. So it really is kind of almost like forcing this to be a very short-sighted, only look at the now instead of the future, which really is what we're not expecting of our public officials. So if the discussion's happening, that's wonderful, but it's kind of a concern with the approach, and I don't think that it's coming from the town manager, clearly. And while I'm up here, I just want to thank Alicia and Emily for their votes and, standing up for community values and the neighborhood elementary schools. I really appreciate it.
Jonathan, I can only speak for myself, but that's not my anticipation either. I was in support of the Wakefield School. But that's irrelevant because it's irregardless. We can, as a council, decide based on the charter. We can only bring it forward to the referendum. However, we're here because we want to hear what the people have to say as well. That's the important thing.
Meg, if I may, I just want to clarify that nobody at this table is trying to stifle any comments about anything. We're simply trying to follow the agenda, and anything that you can relate to the budget is fair to discuss. So
Absolutely.
I don't think anybody here has any intention of telling somebody that they can't speak or share their thoughts. And I can tell you I spent the last 2 hours before this meeting having many discussions with people about coming here and voicing their concerns. So please do not feel unwelcome and do not feel a chill in the air. If anything, please feel welcome to come up and say what you need to say.
And I have to agree with Liz because I get several phone calls over the weekend, and that's why we're here. We represent you. We represent the town. We represent the people. And we are here because we want to hear what you have to say as well. Alicia?
I guess I just have a kind of a clarifying question, comment. My understanding is that the school committee, this is the town council's meeting. The school committee was invited to participate. We didn't even post our own agenda. So I'm a little confused about the town council is unable to add an agenda item, even though it's your meeting, and we haven't even posted our own agenda?
So I'll answer that briefly. This is all procedural stuff, and it's perfectly clear to me and to staff that the objective of both the town council and the school committee is to have as full a discussion of all of the issues that the people in the room want to discuss tonight. Our challenge is that our hands are somewhat tied by the fact that the public hearing was specific to the budget. There are two ways that that can be handled. One is anything that uses the word budget is a comment on the budget. That's fine. The other way to deal with it was to add an item to the agenda that would have allowed a much more extensive discussion about anything that folks wanted to talk about in Wakefield. We were trying to go down that path. We found that we couldn't go down that path because despite the fact that this is a council agenda, the attorney for the school committee feels that you're participating, and since the agendas that you participate in shouldn't be amended the night of the meetings that you're participating in, it's not the best way to honor the intent of that exception in the statute to allow the school committee to participate in an added agenda item. So that puts that option off the table, and we're left with the first option, which is anything that says budget, begin with the word budget, and we're good.
So as long as anybody says, "Hi, I'm here to talk about the budget," and then follows that up with whatever they came prepared to say, or lots of times people aren't prepared to speak and then decide to speak, then that's okay. Just to clarify that. Answer.
I have a question about that. I think I may be wrong that these people came to discuss something and to have their voices heard, and I would certainly entertain the motion to hear their voices. That being said, if the school committee cannot participate in that discussion based on legal counsel, then I think that at that point they can sit in the audience as participants or lead the discussion. But if people want to speak to the council, it's not our decision to make. But certainly I feel everybody has the right to speak who wants to speak. And I welcome the opportunity to hear that. Kristen?
Can I perhaps clarify for the school committee who may have zero idea what you're talking about? About 5 minutes before the meeting was held, I was called into the manager's office and asked, if it would be a violation of school committee open meeting law, which is very different than town council open meeting law. And it says that right in your agenda, if you added an item. So I think I concur with Mrs. Comiskey that we have always, in the 10 years that I've been superintendent, heard from the public. But in terms of adding an actual agenda item, the laws for school committees are they need to be advertised on the Secretary of State website 48 hours in advance and advertised also in 2 other public areas. So although, yes, Mrs. Collins is correct, this is a town council meeting. We sent a screenshot of the agenda to Dave Abbott, who is the school committee lawyer, just 5 minutes before the meeting. And the tricky part is that it's a public hearing with school committee participation is how it's advertised. And so therefore, it's not just their meeting. The town council adding an agenda item is not at issue here. The school committee adding another agenda item is at issue. So we certainly don't want to be non-compliant, but I only found out about this 5 minutes ahead of time. So we're doing our best to make certain that the school committee doesn't run afoul in an appearance of impropriety with OMA, were Dave Abbott's exact words. His preference would be that the town council handle the public input in a different way other than adding to the agenda, unless you'd like the school committee excused. Either is your option, not the school committee's. Does that help?
That helps. I don't think we need to add another item to the agenda. I think we can have a pretty wide latitude in terms of what impacts the budget and public comment. In particular, a big part of our budgeting process looks 6 years out through the capital improvement program. That's part of this budget, so I'm sure many of the concerns people have here relate to the next 6 years, and I would just encourage people to come up and say what they came to say, and we don't need to talk about it much more than that.
Before you speak, we have to decide whether the school committee will be part of this conversation or
As long as we don't add another item to the agenda, we're okay.
Okay, so at this point, based on your comments, I will direct forward to the public to come forward to the podium, and when you do, please state your name for the record.
My name is Darren Austin. I live in Wakefield. Ms. Hill, you mentioned that the people before us represent the community, and I'm here specifically because it's my understanding that the majority of the school committee was not duly elected. I know there was procedures that were followed to put together this committee, but such that I feel like this, the Wakefield vote, so this has nothing to do with the budget, but the Wakefield vote didn't seem like it may have represented our group. And it's a concern if they were duly elected, all 7 officials, and they came to a vote, but since there were so many appointees, that's one of the concerns. So I just want to voice that.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ryan Meyer. I am a Wakefield resident, married with 2 kids who are supposed to start Wakefield Elementary this year. With respect to the budget, has there been any studies on the average length of time that schools are vacant after a closure and what those ancillary costs are for additional police officers, for crime, environmental issues, just the actual cost of running a vacant building of that size? And do we know the average number of years that a school is vacant in the state of Rhode Island? I know we have Wickford, but what's the average number of years that a school's vacant? How much does that cost per year? Do we know that?
So I don't know specifically of any studies, but I remember, not to put you on the spot, Kristen, but when during a work session that we had a while ago, you referenced South Road School when it wasn't occupied, how it was vandalized, and there were some difficulties in maintaining that. I don't know if you can speak to that at all and some of the challenges we had.
And do we have crime statistics on that either?
I don't know if there were crimes actually committed that we actually apprehended anyone, but we added additional cameras to the back for sure, because it was a vacant building before I became superintendent for a number of years, and I'm not certain, perhaps the town manager would know if there were extra police details put there, but I don't know that. I know for certain that we added cameras to the back.
I think with respect to the budget, that would be a good thing to know if we're planning on closing a school in a short period of time, that we do those studies, not only for cost, but for safety. What's going to happen with vandalism and crime and these types of things. If we're looking at such a short time frame, and I think, Mr. Collins, you referenced at one of the previous meetings that you think that it will get repurposed pretty quickly, but we don't know that. And the studies actually show that these buildings are vacant for a long period of time. And if we're going to be having to finance those extra costs with taxpayer dollars, I think it's pretty prudent to know those expenses before we make such a quick decision on something like this. And quite honestly, I don't think this should be about money, but if the whole purpose of closing this is for revenue purposes, I think we should know the revenue figures and the statistics. Thank you.
Anybody else from the audience, please come up and state your name.
Hi, my name is Steve Brophy. I'm here with my wife, Chris. We're South Kingstown residents. We have 4 kids, 2 of them that have completed and are out of the system. 2 of them are at the high school right now. But I'm here today as a business owner. Our family owns a business on Main Street. And relative to the budget, I think this is an issue that we should be discussed. I'm here representing the Wakefield Village Association. I'm here representing the Wakefield Village Association to express our support for the Wakefield Elementary School. The Wakefield Village Association represents over 50 local businesses that support our school system through taxes, donations, volunteerism, enrollment, student employment, internships, and more. These local businesses support the entire school system, and we are thankful for the support we receive from the families and friends of every school and organization in our great town. Together, we oppose the closing of Wakefield Elementary School because we see day in and day out the positive impact that this school has on our Main Street district, and I suspect our budget ultimately. Over the past 10 to 15 years, we have seen the downtown area of South Kingstown experience a profound resurgence. After decades of decline, Main Street is thriving and a vibrant place once again. That success is a result of the many people and organizations who've worked hard, pouring their time, money, and talents into the district. All of us on Main Street are keenly aware that we are supported by residents of every corner of South Kingstown and indeed all of Rhode Island. However, our relationship with Wakefield Elementary is particularly important to downtown's well-being. The after-school and before-school rush on Main Street has a real, palpable, and financially demonstrable impact on the street. People on their way to and from Wakefield School frequent our stores and restaurants, theater, and churches. Families that walk by our shops develop relationships with our shopkeepers, return more frequently, and help us keep this unique historic neighborhood alive throughout the year. Wakefield Elementary is not only a great school with wonderful teachers and staff, but it is also part of the economic engine that drives downtown. Tonight, we'd like to make it clear. We support keeping the school open. We feel option A, as part of your discussions relative to budget, is a viable, practical approach to improving our district. It will be costly and difficult to close South Road and Curtis Corner. Let us execute those tasks well and reassess Wakefield Elementary School question in a few years when the dust has settled. We know there are discussions regarding alternative uses for Wakefield L, but one need look no further than North Kingstown, where Wakefield Elementary closed 13 years ago, only to sit still abandoned today. They too had good intentions for the property. Are there viable alternatives for Wakefield L? Possibly, but only when those options have been vetted against the benefits of maintaining this school, this beating heart, which today is essential to the fabric of Main Street. Let us evaluate the educational and economic considerations thoughtfully and with the full benefit of time, rather than rushing into a decision that is difficult to undo. Again, the questions are, is the education and well-being of the children of Wakefield Elementary the core focus when considering closure? With the town's stated goal of a more walkable community, why would we choose to close the most walkable school of all our schools? And lastly, have we, as an entire community, truly examined the full ramifications financially, budget-wise, of the decision to close Wakefield Elementary? The Village Association is prepared to contribute our time to the evaluation of the options, as we have contributed to many worthy causes in town over the years. We commit to do our part to consider and implement whatever is best for the whole town. We ask you to commit to further appropriate exploration of this complicated issue for the benefit of our children and our community. We are requesting a joint session to include the school committee, town council, economic development, and the village association to further review proposed options and their consequences on the education, economy, and culture of our town. Until that work session can commence, we implore you, please take the closure of Wakefield Elementary off the table for the children, for the families, for the local economy, for the benefit of this entire town. These are our thoughts and our statement as an association. And I appreciate the time and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Brophy. Thank you for your comments. Please come forward and state your name. Would anybody else like to speak?
Good evening. I wasn't planning on speaking.
Well, please state your name for the record.
Excuse me. My name is Brian Kruger. I'm a Wakefield resident. I have a fourth grader at Wakefield Elementary, and my wife, Jen, is in Washington, D.C. right now with Mel. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go for my work schedule, but they're having a good time. It's just as rainy, though. So I wanted to come tonight because I've been part of a community group that's been trying to unpack some of the demographics and capacity and utilization measures that we've been seeing the last few different meetings. And we've been going through the Jacobs reports, the recommendation, the schoolhouse, the RIDE stuff, looking through the newer and fewer Wagner-led initiative to think about the scoring that they're going to do for the bonding initiative. So to see how much subsidy each of the towns might get. And there's a few takeaway points that we were surprised to learn about that I think everyone should know about. The capacity measure, when you think about utilization that RIDE's going to be used to score the bonding, basically puts the South Kingstown elementary schools at ideal utilization rates even 10 years out using the McKibben study. So they're going to be using what's called the functional capacity. There's actually 3 different types of measures that they're using at RIDE, and they're relying on that functional capacity measure. There's an aspirational one, and there's also one called an LEA, and those give you very different, within hundreds and hundreds of students, differences about what is the appropriate level in each of those schools. So I'd encourage everyone actually to go back to those core documents and really take a look at them, because when the RIDE Newer and Fewer initiative is scoring, they're going to be relying on that functional capacity. If you close Curtis Corner and South Road, you're also going to get basically near ideal utilization rates district-wide. You're going to get at that point. If you shut down Wakefield, say soon, then you're going to be a couple hundred students overcrowded. You're going to be over 100%. So you'd have to build in the other elementary schools if you're going to bring 5th grade back and put Skip there. So I hope you take these things into consideration as you're moving forward, and I know we're all part of this great community discussion, so wish you all the best in working through that very, very thorny issue. Thank you.
Brian, I just wanted to say thank you for what you shared, and I know that you have more data in a presentation, and if we do end up having the work session that Mr. Brophy referenced, it'd be great to have you come and give a presentation with some of that information that you have. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter DiStefano. I wear many hats in this conversation. I live off of High Street, so I have an 8-month-old daughter that I would walk to Wakefield School. I own a business on the corner of High and Main Street, so I understand the economic impact of a homeowner walking in my showroom the other day asking, I'm walking my kid home from school, we just wanted to stop in and see what you had to offer. So I understand that as well. I'm also on the planning board, so I understand the comprehensive plan. But tonight I'm here as the director of the chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and we reiterate what the Wakefield merchants had to say. What we really would like to see is just more dialogue and conversation. We'd like to get the business community, anyone else, EDC, any other people that would like to get involved in this conversation, and just have this open work session. So do you think that's possible, that we could have that open work session? And if so, how do we go about doing that?
So Pete, we can't vote on anything tonight. We can certainly, maybe when we close the public hearing, if we want to, encourage some discussion about scheduling a work session, if everybody seems to be in consensus, we can do that. We just can't officially vote on anything. So I think maybe when, Meg, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we close the public hearing, we'll probably continue that discussion.
What we can probably do is place it on file and speak to the Economic Development Committee, because we would have to, per your request, include them. Certainly, it's not out of the realm of anything that we're here for open dialogue. We're not here to shut people down. Believe me, this is so contentious, and people are very passionate about this. I am as well. My husband and his siblings and his parents all went to Wakefield.
And I think some of the business community, I think we apologize for being late to the game. I think we understand you guys have been working on this for a really long time. And to be honest, with the conversation I've had with most people, they didn't think it was possible that was going to happen. So shame on us. We say we apologize. Now we want in.
And Peter, one of the things I just want to quickly add, we had a contract compliance committee that Liz, myself, Roland, and Scott, and the superintendent. And so during that, our biggest push, or definitely one of my biggest concerns, was getting the community involved and getting them to the summit. I feel that we did what we could to get other businesses involved to come to the summits. I believe the superintendent called many of the businesses during that time. So I know
no one at the chamber heard about this.
That's surprising to me. But what I'm getting at is that it's not like we didn't try, but I do understand where you're coming from. So we'll see what we can do in terms of having more discussion at that point.
Okay. You mentioned you spoke to someone at the chamber?
Just hearing from Mrs. Crawford, we had a focus group just for the chamber, and folks did show up to that. It's a focus group for the chamber at the chamber with the executive director.
So Liz couldn't be here tonight because she has the flu, and she asked me to come and speak about this because of that. So maybe there's a miscommunication. I'm not sure, but it sounds like she sent me in that.
So Pete, to your point, it is questionable amongst some people that there was a good cross-section of the population. Some people think there was, and some disagree. So let's, I think, move forward and try to include all the voices.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
I have to concur with that. I think based on the number of people that are here, this conversation is something that should be had and absolutely should be continued. We will bring it forward. Thank you for stepping up, Peter. I appreciate that. And we will contact the Economic Development Committee and see if we can get a roundtable discussion going on for this whole situation, because people are very concerned about this.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what Joe had said, too, that there are definitely distinct camps about the cross-sections that we feel were included with everything. And I think that there was definitely some miscommunication in the process about who was responsible for reaching out to the different groups and sections of the community. And I know that that was definitely an obstacle that we dealt with. But I do agree that we could have done a lot better in getting the cross-sections represented. And I think in hindsight, there's much we would have done differently. But I'm glad that you're here now, and I think that this work session would be a great step in the right direction.
I would entertain anybody else who would like to come up to speak to please come to the podium, state your name for the record, and we'll proceed forward.
Hi, Stacy Bazzioni from Wakefield. I know that you've all received an email from Brian Kruger with the information that he presented tonight with the slides, and so there is some new data there that was not presented to the school committee at the time that they made the vote, and I would urge the school committee to consider adding on their next agenda a reconsideration of the vote to vote for option B. I think there is more information out there now that needs to be considered, and you're also hearing from the business members. And then my ask of the town council would be that if there is a planning committee put in place to determine the process of closing any schools, that you take an active role in that. The majority of the school committee was appointed by the town council, and I would ask that you would take a very active role in that so that we can be sure that the entire community is represented. The community was not well represented in the vote by the school committee. That's why so many of us are here. That's why you've heard from so many of us. So I would ask that you take an active role in that. Do you have any information on the planning committee?
The only thing that I can say to you, Stacy, is we have been involved in this process more so than we have been involved in other school committee actions in a long time. The town charter does not allow us as a council to vote on this decision. This decision in terms of school closure is based solely on the school committee. A lot of people in the community are under the impression that we as a council can supersede or override their decision or become involved in the voting process. We cannot.
I wasn't unclear about that. I think that that's been made very clear. But when Mr. Miller proposed the vote for option B, he spoke of a planning committee that he said he would hope would have members from the town council on it.
I think he referred to it as a buildings committee, if I'm correct.
No, a planning committee.
Is it planning?
A planning committee. He also referred to a caveat that has not yet been defined. I've called him and written 2 emails, and I have not received a definition as to exactly what the caveat is.
I would certainly welcome the opportunity for the council to get as involved as we possibly can.
I hope so.
Absolutely. We all have a stake in this. We all live in town. We all have children in this town. We all have children who are being educated through our school system. So we're on your side. We're not against the people. Truthfully, I promise you, we're not. And I believe wholeheartedly in the passion of the people that are coming out to speak. I really do. And I can't speak for the rest of the council. I can speak only for myself. But I would be remiss if I didn't say I would not want to be engaged in the process. Unfortunately, we don't have that vote. Our vote will solely be once the decision is made or reconfirmed by the school committee. We, as a council, will decide whether it goes out to a vote on the ballot, and then it's up to the voters to decide. So that's kind of where it stands. But if there is a process and work sessions that can be continued and planning sessions that are involved, I certainly, for one, would absolutely be there.
I would appreciate it. I haven't heard a whole lot about putting the children first in this process, so I would hope that you would be able to bring that.
Children do come first.
Yes, they should, especially in this sort of a decision. It's about them. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow up, I think you'll get great participation from this council if we're invited to the table, and I think we will be. And just know that we have no vote, but we certainly would be involved in the process.
Just to piggyback on that, I think in particular in a circumstance where a school would be closed or opened up, it is the town's responsibility to decide what happens to that property. So I think the council would have to be involved in that process.
I just have a question about something that Mr. Kruger had said. So relative to capital planning. So when we move fifth grade back, potentially, or we're going to, and skip into the elementary schools and close Wakefield School, we then have to build out on those buildings, on the other buildings, to be able to fit all of the students. So is that embedded in our capital plan? Are there dollar amounts? I know that the Wakefield closure wouldn't happen for 5 years anyway. That was what we voted on. But would it put, is that in the capital plan, the building out on the 3 schools after we close Wakefield?
So the capital plan that you approved and then the town council approved in January doesn't include things that you added after January. But RGB, the consultant, will be at your April 24th school committee meeting to answer any of these questions that you have.
My name again?
You don't have to say it.
Right.
We know who you are.
All right, Steve Brophy. This is really me personally, not Wakefield Village at this stage of the game, but just some personal thoughts, and I'll be quick. and I guess it has to do with the budget in some way, because it's all about monies and where monies go when you close a school and that type of thing. I think an unfortunate fallout of some of the discussions is some misinformation that's out there in the community, and it's causing some groups to pit against another group, and that's not good. That's not healthy for South Kingstown. Personally, we have 4 kids go through Peacedale School. It's a great school, and feel very strongly about it. Matunuck's a great school. West Kingston's a great school. Wakefield Elementary is a great school. My feeling is they should all remain open. But I hope, as the information is delivered, that it's done in such a way, so that it's delivered in such a way that people understand it, that it's not, if we close your school, ours is going to be better, or maybe it's the interpretation of the data, but I'm not exactly sure what's happening. But it's just an unfortunate circumstance that exists right now, and hopefully the air can be cleared and that we can all work as a community, Peacedale parents, Wakefield parents, Matunuck, West Kingston, etc., to save all of our elementary schools in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
I just want to say, whenever a business owner comes up and shares their thoughts, I listen to everybody who has anything to say, but it's always particularly, it gives me pause when a business owner puts themselves out there, because it's a lot more than just their own opinion that they're stating. You know, they're putting them out there, themselves, their livelihood, sort of on the line when they take a stance or a side. And so to see people from the Chamber, business owners, the Wakefield Village Association, to see those people come forward and share their thoughts, it's very powerful and it's meaningful. And I just think that a lot of the people who show up to these discussions sell themselves short in how they invest in our communities and what they give back, whether it's here at the table for this discussion. We saw some business owners at the summits that we had where we did get feedback, or sponsoring events and supporting our schools. So I just wanted to take special note of the people who really put themselves out there and how valuable, and I recognize what a risk that is, and it's great to hear you and have you part of the conversation.
And just to clarify, Liz feels that way except for me.
Definitely don't like the
I would just like to say one thing about school committee in general. Everybody knows that I am an avid supporter of A. I think that I've made that very, very clear. But what I would like to say is that I honestly believe, from the short time that I've been on this committee, realizing how much time, emotion, investment, time away from my family that being on a part of this committee takes. I don't think that any one of the 7 members on this committee would be making a decision, or would be here, I should say. I don't think that anyone would be on this committee if they didn't really have the best interest of the community and the kids at heart, because it takes a lot. I don't agree with the way that 5 of the committee members voted, but I hope that after hearing from so many true experts in this community, previous principals, previous administrators, PhD professionals from Brown University, from URI, that we as a whole committee can understand, and that the community can empathize with the fact that we're up here really to serve, and that sometimes you make a mistake because we are not experts. I am certainly not an expert in facilities studies. I like to think of myself as an expert in academia, as I'm a professor, but I'm not an expert in PK through 12 academia. So that's why it's so important to listen and to keep an open mind and to be able to be a little fluid. And sometimes I may say something even after I think I've really researched the heck out of it. And I may say something that's a mistake, or after I get new information, I may have to say, I was wrong about that. And hearing this new information and hearing from the Chamber, hearing from the WVA, hearing from these PhDs and previous administrators, I may need to change my mind and to not be judged on that. Because I could be in a position in the future where I have to say that, and I would hope that I would still maintain the respect of the community, because I am doing my best. And I think that everybody up here honestly, I believe, is doing their best. And if we need to make a new decision, which I really, really, really hope that we do, I love the idea of the new committee. I'll be a member for whatever happens in the future. I really hope that everyone would still respect all of the people on the school committee that are serving and appreciate how much really goes into it.
Do we have any more comments from the audience, please? And please state your name.
Christian Blaney, how are you today? I've got 2 kids in the school system, one at Wakefield School and one at heading into high school next year. Good Lord. I want to speak to something a little bit larger, and this is pertaining to the budget. Actually, it came out of the budget. The issue of the declining enrollment, to me, is the real difficult part to get my head around. I'm a lifelong resident here, came up through the school system. Stepping Stone was my kindergarten, if that says anything. And there's 2 major issues we have here, and obviously one is affordable housing, and we know that. I know we have a committee for that. I do mortgage loan origination by trade, and I do a lot of business here in this area, and I can tell you that a $78,000 median income cannot afford a $350,000 median house. They just can't with any reasonable amount of debt. That's a huge issue here, and I know that we're starting to do a little bit of work on that, but I would love to hear more detail about what's happening with that. The second thing is, the other half of the business that I do is in towns like East Greenwich, where people are moving there specifically for the school system, regardless of the ridiculous property taxes and regardless of, I know they have their own issues within their budget in their school system over there as well, but constantly I'm doing mortgages for folks that are moving there and saying we want to bring our kids to school. Now, when I was in the school system, and Kate and I actually graduated together from South Kingston High School, back then it was excellence in education. Back then this place was a destination where people came to bring their families to go to school. And it doesn't appear that that's happening right now based on the statistics in your budget, if I'm not mistaken. So these are 2 high-level issues that I would love to hear what's being done about those. We're boiling down to a closing of a school or other schools, which that's not going to help attract people to the community either. When you're taking a vibrant community school that's right in town here and closing it down, that isn't going to help. But the larger issue is what I would love to hear more information about, what's being done to help that. Why aren't people coming here? Why is the enrollment down so much? And what's the cause of it? And what do you guys have to say about it?
Christian, one of the things that came out of the study, from what I recall in one of the meetings I was in, definitely affordability is a factor. I think we've talked about it at the town level. We've allocated money to help study what affordable housing should look like in our town and what we can do to help. But one of the big things is fertility rates as well. People aren't having kids like they used to in the past. And then you could also say, maybe from the way that we've wanted to keep our town small in some regards with over 55 communities, that kind of affects, the ability for folks. There's one, over 55 community where the average sale price, I think right now, is at $410,000. But when you talk about $350,000 average house and $78,000 income, that doesn't leave much for anything. So at the same time, when you might think $100 or $200 is not a huge deal on someone's taxes, that person making $78,000 or that family on the average $350,000 house,
they're moving.
Right.
Yeah.
So I understand East Greenwich, but I think also being in the same business like you, one of the advantages to East Greenwich is also where it's located. Some people have that mentality in Rhode Island. They don't want to drive more than 15 or 20 minutes. So that does come into play as well.
And Christian, I think there probably is a strong correlation between higher taxes usually equals less kids. Just the fact that a family with 3 children, probably at some point, the cost of the home and the tax burden make it unaffordable.
And I think in particular what the study is going to look like in terms of affordable housing is we're going to look at potential density bonuses in particular zoning districts, probably around where there's transit corridors. So I am hopeful that we'll come up with some good policy ideas to try and encourage the development of more affordable housing in town. That is something that's going to take time. And of course, the town does not control any of this. Of course, really building is dependent on what developers want to do when they come into town. So, you know, it's a process that's going to take a long time, and it's going to take cooperation from
It's a high-level issue. I mean, and but it's an issue that is continuing to get worse. I mean, so that's...
One last thing is, in my real estate business, one of the biggest problems we have is a lot of developers don't want to build in our town for a number of reasons. So we need to do something to change that.
And I think one of Joe's favorite comments, I'm surprised he didn't say it, was nothing moves slower than government. And I think that this town council has been super active in trying to address the affordable housing. We've recognized what a problem it is, and we gave $100,000 to the Affordable Housing Collaborative in an effort to get them to come up with that study. I think that just as it relates to the school department, I was a graduate of South Kingstown High School, the largest class that ever graduated. It was nearly 400 students, and I was at Peacedale when it was bursting at the seams, and it was a different experience for sure. But I think that right now this school committee is working on a lot of initiatives that have the potential to bring in families and students, especially what they're doing at the high school. And I think the investment that we're going to be making in the high school in the future, renovations to bring that building up to snuff, if you will, and the programs that they're running and the teachers they have now are just phenomenal. So it's slow, it's incremental, but I think that we've seen a lot more action in the last 3 or 4 years than we've ever seen before. And I think we're getting momentum and we're going to get there. But I 100% agree, and I think that having people like you as part of that conversation, because you seem extremely knowledgeable on the topic, and encouraging people like you to come and participate, because as Emily said earlier, we're not experts, and when these experts sort of come out of the woodwork and share with us their knowledge and their information, it just does nothing but help. So thank you for bringing it up, and you're totally right.
Thank you.
And I'd like to address just, Abel, there isn't any question that free market is a factor, and developers are going to build what free market pushes, but tax burden is another factor that's pretty relevant.
Hi, I'm Mark Levitt, and I'm over 55. And I have twin boys. And I have twin boys, though, 4 years old. So I confused those people that thought that after 55, you weren't going to add to the school population. Let's see here. I agree with what Mrs. Kaminsky said about the fact that we all, at various points, make judgments, make decisions based on facts that later we understand that might not be correct. And there's no sin in doing that. There's no sin in being able to say that, well, you know, I thought this one day and this another day. I mean, look at John Boner, who decided... He was the Speaker of the House who was very against marijuana until he began to be a lobbyist for it. And last I saw, he was listening to a Grateful Dead album.
This is as it relates to the budget, right?
Oh, what? I was just going to, you know what I messed up? I forgot. Budget. All right, let's keep going. So I'd like to just say that I would, as an educator, if a decision is made to change the decision, I'd be happy to be involved with ways in which Wakefield Elementary School can, like all the other great elementary schools in the town, have specific focus, much like the way that the dual language program worked, much like the Compass School works, that can bring people in and say, this is a unique opportunity for my child, I want to go there. And I'm talking about my children. Those two children have moved here to Wakefield into town because I wanted them to have a walkable experience. Lastly, I'd like to know, and I don't know how, and I think that there is a movement to possibly alter the previous decision of the school board. How would that be done? Is there any way that procedurally that can happen? And I'm not belittling the work that's been done. I'm saying that there's a lot of newer evidence that in some ways contradicts some of the evidence that had been presented. If that becomes a widespread effort, is there a way to change the decision either through your work as the council or your work as the school committee? Thank you.
Mark, I can. Mark, 1 second. I'll just respond to that. Specifically, we haven't met since that vote has taken. One of the things we considered doing that night was start to set up a transitional committee to start ironing out some of those things. That meeting, that first meeting that we'll have since that vote is a week from tomorrow, and that procedural type of thing is all baked into these things like that we discussed generically about caveats and triggers and that kind of thing, but we have not even had a chance to start discussing what those things are and won't be able to until a week from tomorrow. So, and I know you've got an email out to me. I've got a drafted response, but I sit on a lot of things that I hear you. So there is a way actually to reverse the decision. There would have to be a way. I can't speak to that because every single individual on this committee made the decision based on what they knew, and that is something that every one of the 7 would have to be able to be comfortable with. I cannot speak to that at all. There.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to the question is yes. If we put on the agenda that there was
and anything is possible.
It is possible to put on the agenda, as the agenda is built, to have a reconsideration and a possible vote to reconsider keeping Wakefield School open on the agenda for the 24th. That's absolutely possible. And I really hope to see it on the agenda of a possible vote. I really hope we see it.
Hi, my name is Jason Ralph. I have a couple of items, one of which is my wife is at home watching, so she wants to make sure that I brought this up. And it has to do with the budget, so... I know, I'll be on the sofa. So that is asking for an increase in the property tax transfer to cover the cost of a language itinerant for all students K through 5. Don't believe that it's fair for close to 40%, 30-40% of our students to not receive a language education all the way through 7th, 8th grade, whatever it is. The other item is going to probably make me the least popular person in the room, except for the other 5 people who on the committee who voted that way. And that is to kind of bring up an issue with this aspirational capacity versus functional capacity information that's come up. I think it's been misunderstood. My understanding from reading the same documents and everything is that aspirational capacity is not a measure to look at what's the ideal amount of students for a given school that already exists. It's if we were going to build a new school, it would be best to create it for the aspirational capacity. We would create it for 21st century learning. We would have breakout rooms and spaces. Our schools aren't like that currently. So the importance of, as far as my understanding, and I'm not an expert, so I may be mistaken, but the important idea is the ratio between the aspirational capacity and the functional capacity. So that lets you know how efficient your school actually is. So if you have that ratio where the functional capacity is much higher than the aspirational capacity, that's a school that's just not designed to create a good environment for 21st century learning. It doesn't necessarily mean that as our enrollment drops, that we should be okay if it stays below or stays near the aspirational capacity, because our schools were not designed for that. If you look at that ratio of functional capacity to aspirational capacity to functional capacity at our 4 elementary schools, at Peacedale it's 1.3, and that is because the basement of Peacedale is completely empty, and so there's a lot of extra space there, which will be addressed by bringing grades back and whatnot. Matunic is 0.83, West Kingston is 0.76, and Wakefield is 0.71. And what that means is that if we were to drop down to the point where we had enrollment at the aspirational level, we would simply have about a third of that building, or 30% of that building empty. You would have small rooms that aren't being used. As I said, this is my reading of it. I may be mistaken. But it seems that the argument for only using aspirational capacity as the measure that we're looking at is it is not the way it was meant to be used. So, thank you.
So I think just to clarify something, aspirational capacity is, you are exactly correct, is what you would use square footage per student if you were building new. So that you are exactly correct. What the graphs with the new information that has been brought forth show is that it's functional capacity that we should be using, and that's, we're right around, we're actually exactly where we want to be with that from the documents that I've been presented with by the community. So we absolutely do not want to be at aspirational unless we're going to be building new everywhere, which I don't think the taxpayers of this town want to see. So you are correct. We do not want to be there. In terms of having empty classrooms, we need to have empty classrooms unless you want to go back to having art on a cart, music on a cart, you want your science labs on a cart. You need to have those empty classrooms so that we can have 21st century learning. So just to clarify.
Emily, wouldn't some of the empty classroom, some of those things that you mentioned, I'm assuming that a lot of the schools have art rooms or science rooms, or am I mistaken by that? Okay, because you're saying that if they were full.
Right, so to the best of my understanding, and again, I am not an expert but from the information that I have been presented with and that I have gathered through research, is that you don't want to have you don't want to fill up all of your homeroom classrooms, right? Because if you do, then you don't have art set up. In the busy day with Common Core and all the things that need to be accomplished during the school day, you don't want the students wasting time in staying in a homeroom classroom while the art teacher sets up. You want them to be continuing on with science as part of STEAM, and then as soon as they're done with that, they can go to their set up art room. That's the best of my understanding. So if you fill up all of the rooms, which would be getting towards a higher capacity by looking at the homeroom usage, which the LEA uses, then you, in essence, you don't have any breakout areas. So, for example, an art room is in an LEA viewpoint, it looks like it's empty. It's not being used. So that brings that number down where it looks like, oh, well, why do we have all these empty rooms? You have those empty rooms on purpose so that you're saving time during the day, so that the day is used for instruction and student purpose and learner purpose instead of filling up the rooms, which may look good on paper if you're looking at the LEA, but it's wasting a lot of student and teacher time. Does that answer?
It kind of does, but I was always under the impression, and maybe I'm completely wrong, that even in Matunic, as an example, there were empty classrooms.
So that's before we bring the preschool, which the preschool, just to clarify, is not going into all of the elementary schools as it's rolling out right now. The preschool is going into 2 of the elementary schools, West Kingston and Peacedale. So we still have opportunity to grow in terms of growing our preschool program, and maybe in the future having preschool in all 4 of our elementary schools. That also isn't taking into consideration bringing the 5th graders back in. That's going to take up some space. So I think that's important to look at what the building looks like once we've got preschool and once we've got 5th graders before we start closing and or adding on to schools. So,
And from what I understand, the whole thing is that it's a 3 to 5 years out, looking at planning, and as you look at planning, deciding if that's the right way to go based off of the information that you're discovering along the way. And maybe I could be completely wrong, but that was my impression of...
this is looking 3 to 5 years.
Right, okay.
And it's still falling right in the functional capacity line.
And I guess one of the things I'm confused about too is that by taking Wakefield offline and bringing back 5th grade and integrating Skip into the elementary schools, we then have to build out on 3 other elementary schools. So I do wonder how that all works its way into the capacity measurements too. And I also think the biggest thing that I got out of that, the PowerPoint that we were sent, is that LEA capacity is definitely way off. I just wanted to add that.
I just want to add something. Believe me, don't hit me when I say this. Brian Abel and I had the opportunity to meet with Gina Raimondo last week, and we talked about the, and I thank Kate for asking me to bring it up, the federal funding formula for the schools here in South Kingstown, which we did discuss at the meeting. Folks, there's no sin in saying we are considered a rich town. They want to put money into refurbishing the schools in the inner cities, moving things to the city schools, people who are more impoverished than South Kingstown is considered. Right now, we receive approximately 35%, which is one of the lowest. Gina Raimondo stood there and said, what was the phrase about the schools, newer and fewer, leaner and fewer? There's a 5-category rating.
I don't remember about the phrase, but what she was saying was that every community should have the same equal footing. It shouldn't be based off of whether or not you're a city school or you're a
correct
suburban school.
But her logic in saying that is, if we meet a 5-grade ratio in terms of things that we could do in South Kingstown, the funding from the state would go from 35% to 55%, and we would receive more funding. And that means, one of the implications, the interpretations, was closing schools. I'm not in favor of closing community schools. I think it's important to the community, but maybe Abel and Bryant can read into it differently. However, she absolutely stood up and said we would receive more funding if we were more prudent in the way we operated our school system. Is that correct? Kind of?
I think mainly. I think the impression that I got was that the concerns that we've heard raised that we wouldn't qualify for the 55% are misplaced, that if we meet all their standards, we'd be eligible for the 55%. It doesn't matter where your town is from. That being said, I think the newer and fewer is just only one of the points that they look at. You know, they're looking at sustainability, and I forget the other. I'm sure you guys.
Just in terms of closing schools, I spoke with RIDE, and I was absolutely assured that closing Curtis Corner and taking South Road offline was enough to meet the newer and fewer, and that if we, in addition, closed, because I'm all for making sure we get as much money as we can. I'm not, looking to have taxpayers or anybody suffer because, it's educationally best to have 4 schools. I think it's important with this much money that we're talking about on the table to be meeting the needs of the entire community. And I was absolutely assured when I researched this myself that closing Wakefield School would not ensure that we got any more money, that we are closing Curtis. I just want to just make sure this is clear. I was reassured that closing Curtis Corner and by taking South Road offline, that would meet that requirement, and that if we closed Wakefield, it wouldn't give us anything extra.
So I just want a clarification. We're talking about housing reimbursement.
This would be, yeah, associated with the bonding for
Right.
Yes.
So, and to Alicia's point, if we don't have to put additions on the schools, we don't need to bond for additions.
Well, I think that we're still going to need to bond because if you look at the Jacobs report, we have a ton of money to spend even if we did nothing at all to our schools. I don't forget that number, but maybe it was $60 million over the next 5 years to bring our facilities up to standard. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would need clarification on that because.
I would like to give Dr. Stringfellow the opportunity to speak before we go back to the public.
I just want to make one clarification. The school committee took South Road offline in 2004 or 2005. So when you speak of it taking offline again, you have not received housing aid since that period of time. So that part of the discussion is not relative to RIDE. Moving the preschool out doesn't do anything in terms of the newer and fewer, just so that you know that. So the rest of the discussion, wonderful. But the preschool is already taken off quite some time ago.
Thank you, Dr.
Just so I'm clear, because I didn't understand what you just said. You're debating, we're going to pay the tax whether we're paying the town or the city or the government. So we're just talking about who looks better in this conversation, like if the tax is charging, the town is charging us more, or the state or the government? Joe?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
My point was, if we don't need to put additions on the schools, we're going to spend less money.
Gotcha. I just wanted to clarify.
Pete, I'll add one more thing to that. It's as a town, we've been getting less and less money. We all pay our taxes to this, to the state and federally. I think that for the longest time, though, a lot of our money is indirectly gone to the schools that need it the most in particular areas. That's a positive thing, but at the same time, we need help here too. So if we can utilize and get more money from this particular state issue of bonds, then I think it would be foolish not to.
Okay.
So are we hitting the other 4 targets here, aside from newer and fewer?
So the other targets can be a variety of things that make up that plus 20 points. And Robert discussed it with you as a group several times. So one of the pieces are career and technical center education. And certainly when you're looking to redesign the spaces at the high school, that's one of the primary focuses. Another piece, as Abel mentioned, is sustainability. So when you're making some of these upgrades, you're looking into making more environmentally friendly choices that were made long time ago. And so there's Marianne and I have been to virtually every single meeting that's been offered throughout the state for the last year regarding the Jacobs report. They won't be able to speak to you and say, this is exactly what your housing aid is going to be. They can preliminarily say, yep, you're going in the right way. We've already heard that by you hiring a consultant like the Legacy Company and foreshadowing a long-range facilities plan that will take care of each and every one of your buildings. You're in an absolute wonderful place in terms of positioning yourself for the full reimbursement of the 20%, but you won't actually hear that answer. So Emily could get reassurance that we're going in the right direction. We've specifically asked, what will our number be? And until you go through the stage 1 and stage 2 planning, and then you start the project, you won't get knowledge of the actual number. But again, on the 24th, RGB is going to lay out exactly what your deadlines are. A letter of interest, very similar to the capital planning schedule that we go through every single January. We lay out for you the necessities for school construction pivot times to bring it forth for, excuse me, the letter of intent has to be due at a certain time, stage 1 application, stage 2 application, then it comes to the council, then it goes to RIDE, then it goes to the Board of Education, and then enabling legislation, just like what happened when we put on, we changed, gave an upgrade to the high school, added roofs on, and the town supported our HVAC system for Matunic that's going in this summer, and for West Kingston that I think is scheduled for the following year.
Ken, we know who you are, but can you please state your name?
So my name is Ken Tetzner. I'm a business owner. I'm also a parent. I have a 6-year-old that goes to Wakefield School, and I'm also a resident of the town. I just wanted to clear up one thing because I don't think everybody in the audience is sure how the process works. How do we go about getting this work session? Like, I understand you can't vote on it tonight, but I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, which I'm kind of hearing, like we're trying to get more money from the state so we can spend more money because it's going to cost more money to close a school. So, you know, these are all things that I think in a work session, with an open discussion, like we're all business owners, we all have a business state of mind, we run businesses. So I think we can bring something to the table as well, and we'd like to be heard from. But how do you go about putting this work session together?
I think that it sounds like we were pretty receptive to that idea, and I think, I mean, unless I'm hearing from anybody here that they absolutely don't want to sit down and talk, we'll probably offline connect with all the groups and throw around some dates, and then once we know, I'm sure that we can get that message out to these interested groups about when.
I won't put Dale on the line, but typically what will happen is the town hall will reach out to the Economic Development Committee, people who might be interested in having a work session, and then we'll coordinate a couple of meeting dates, and based on what's conducive to everybody involved, once we get a formulated date, we'll all sit down together, and I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so it's pretty much safe to say that that's the direction we're going to go?
Yes.
And that'll get done? All right.
You know, Ken, it's not about getting more money from the state to spend more money. It's more of getting more money from the state so that we can save the taxpayers in our town more money.
Well, if it's going to cost more money to shut down a school...
I'm not talking about any option in particular. I'm just talking about if you looked at A, B, C, or D, every single one of those came with bonding. So getting more money from the state, let's say hypothetically it was $100 million. If you're going to get $20 million more in reimbursement, that's a huge number as an example that the people in our town don't have to front at the local level.
But it sounds to me that you're going to have to close schools in order to go with that program to get that money, and that's going to cost more money. So we're going to get more money to spend more money, is the way I'm looking at it. So,
and I guess we could all look at it different ways, and
Sure.
That's why we're going to talk about it.
That's why work session, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sabri Rama. I live in Wakefield. I own a business in Wakefield. The reason I moved to Wakefield is because, and the reason I chose the location where I live is because of the school, that it's been discussed to be closed. I'm from another country. I came to this country, in 2000. We walk to school every day, and we all know that our kids are not eating healthy, and some of us, don't walk much. And some of the kids are, heavy. Obese. Obese is something that we are dealing in America everywhere you look at it. So I understand that you guys looked at what you looked and decided to close the Wakefield school. But in my opinion, why would you take a school that is the most walkable, and probably somebody else has said this, school where kids can walk to school every day and get out of the school and play at the playground and get some exercise, and close that so that my daughter has to get on a bus about 45 minutes before, get less sleep, and then be on the bus so she gets no walk to and from school, and then she gets to go right on the bus because she can't play afterward. The solution to this is, in my opinion, even if you take Wakefield out, you're still going to maintain that building. You're still going to keep it up until you sell it, develop it. And I personally don't like developing that property because there's a park. That's where we have our town gathers on Memorial Day, and, we have the park there. So I think that when you think about it, nobody can see the future. Today, the population might be going down, but who's to say that in 2 years the population is going up? So why won't we just fix the schools because it's going to cost more money to build additions into schools. It's going to cost more money because we're going to buy additional buses. We're going to spend more fuel in the buses. We're going to the ambient. We're going to pollute the ambient with diesel fuels. Let me think. But I think that the smarter way would be we fix all our schools, okay? And I don't care what the state says, okay? I'm fine paying my taxes as much as I'm paying. And so then we close a class, okay? And then we use that class for nothing for a year, 2 years. But if the population grows, now we're ready. We're ready to get the school going, get the new students in. So, I mean, on top of that, there is no route or there is no directions. There is no plan whatsoever where, okay, we're going to close the Wakefield School in 5 years, but what's really happened? Where are we getting the money to build schools, additional schools? What's happening to that property? Am I going to be worried? I mean, I live two houses down the street. What am I going to go now? Now I'm going to have people sleeping in there, you know, breaking the glasses. My property value is going to go down. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I understand the state's going to give us some money, okay, but who cares, really? It's really not always about the money. It's about our kids. How about we say it's about our kids? And yes, my daughter's my youngest, so I mean she's going to be out of there in 2 years. But I love the Wakefield Elementary School because as a business owner, and I'm not trying to take credit, but I have organized few things with the, and I love that. I love when you have smaller school, you can actually do things with that small school, like. You can organize a Halloween custom party that I paid for, or you can organize, I got a big balloon where the kids at the last day of school, they were running through it. We had, you know, but when you have these large schools, excuse me, yeah, I wanted, so there she is. She's a proof that if schools get bigger, forget about my daughter going on the stage and having these really great programs that we have today. I just don't understand, how did this all come? So first of all, I heard this. I don't know if it's true. I guess that the school budget is like $1 million more or something than what we're supposed to be, right? So we're trying to close $1 million gap, but we're trying to spend like how many millions of dollars to fix other houses, other schools? So I mean, how did this all come? I just want to know really the truth. Why did this even come in the agenda? Let's close some schools. I just want to know that.
I'll just take a really quick try at that. I think it's a very complex issue. I can't speak for what happened, you know, with the school committee and their decision, but I think they're not necessarily looking at just the potential state funding going for newer and fewer. What they're seeing is a steady decline in school-age population in the town. You know, so over 1,000 students at this point, fewer in our schools, so they don't need as many schools to house all those kids. And by keeping that many schools open, they're worried that they're going to spread their financial resources too thin. And that will impact the educational quality that we're giving to all the students. And so that's what they're concerned with. I don't think they want to just close the school to get some money for bonding. That's the impression I get. Now, I think it's a very complex discussion still, and I've heard a lot of interesting comments about capacity utilization that might indicate that we should take this process much more slowly. And I think we were talking about taking it slowly as we went through this process. So I heard one comment from somebody about some rumors out there in the community. I think one of them is that, you know, Wakefield is on the chopping block for next year or the year after that. And I think I would like to hear that that's not what's going to happen, and that we are taking this slowly to make sure we're doing it right. You know, we talk about closing Curtis Corner, bringing fifth grade back to the elementary schools, see what the capacity utilization is like at that point, then reassess how necessary it is to close Wakefield School. So I just want to know about that timeline.
So the basics of that is we've heard some of that as well. And when we made the decision, we talked about going back several months to the night of the presentations. We saw an implementation timeline that would be aggressively a 3-year timeline when we started breaking ground for some of the expansions that might be needed and any of the impacts from the different options. Beyond that, we talked about the concept that applications to RIDE would be going in this year, approvals mid next year, then it would need to go to bond referendum in the town, which conceivably could be 2019, but may not necessarily, we may not want to do that in a non-election year, so that would move that out to 2020. So that that framework was set up for this possibility, but that it would be a 4 or 5 year kind of thing. But we also discussed things like triggers and things like enrollment numbers, and if we had turnarounds really quickly, if we had, or alternatively, if we saw a lot of the flip side of that occurring, there would be these contingencies set up within the planning thing, which we can start doing with a planning, the execution plan that's being developed with the school committee, subcommittee, and the other pieces. But to address Mr. Rama's question about why, Liz, you mentioned you graduated with almost 400 students. The last 4 or 5 kindergarten classes coming into South Kingstown, and they're pretty tightly wrapped as a predictor, have been under 200. And back then, I think there was 5 elementary schools, right? There's South Road plus the 4 that are there. So we're talking about half the number of students. So the concept of dilution of resources played heavily into this, and it's been part of the discussion, not just since February, but for really since 2010 or even before that, but most significantly all throughout this process. In fact, even in the day that I was appointed, I was asked some of these exact questions. Would you be able to deal with this? And I specifically said, if we're looking at enrollment numbers that look like they're heading towards half of what they were at their peak, I don't know what we can do. So that's all the things that went into this discussion. It was never just a let's figure out what's the cheapest way out of this. So those are kind of the things. The timeline, that's the basic framework within the presentations were this would be complete by 5 to 6 years, wouldn't even be able to be started until after we get through bond referendums, which you'll decide some of those, could be as early as 2019, but if you want to push those out and some of these other parts of this, sort of the enrollment trends or those kind of things flesh out and either map to what they have given us or go a different direction, we can pivot from there.
So, Roland, you're confirming that there's absolutely no way that Wakefield School would close any sooner than 4 to 5 years, and it could be later. Very true. Can you just confirm that?
I can confirm that the investments that would be all needed to make all of that happen can't happen within a year or two. I can't confirm that we won't see staff and families looking for alternative placements that would bring it to beyond. Well, you did ask me.
No, I'm saying.
You're asking me to confirm something
confirm that
I don't have all the variables that might be in place.
But
I'm saying those variables make me unable to confirm anything, especially as just one member in this process.
Right. So I just need to say, though, that when the school committee voted to close Wakefield School, committee members again and again assured families that there is no way this is going to take place for another 4 to 5 years. And so if there is any chance that you're saying something could change, staff could move, families could move out, that it's going to now happen any sooner, what's the difference between that and saying, forget it, let's take the closure of Wakefield School off and revisit it in a few years? If you're saying the timeline could potentially change from 4 to 5 years to sooner, why aren't we revisiting the vote and if that happens in the future, then maybe consider it.
I think that's off topic, but that was explicitly discussed the night of the vote. So, but it is off topic, so I'm gonna stop.
I know you've been standing there, so please state your name.
No, it's fine. I'm Lauren Weinstock. I live here in town, and the timing of this most recent discussion is exactly on topic with what I was hoping to address with all of you tonight, which is the timing of this process, and specifically recognizing and hearing the commentary tonight that, number one, there remain many, many questions about the impact of closing Wakefield Elementary on our community from the business owners. We haven't heard, but I know there's a lot of questions about the impact on home values in downtown Wakefield as a function of a school closure. We just don't know the answers to those questions. In addition, there seems to be a lot of community consensus around the other elements of the school board decision, the school committee decision, with respect to investing in the high school, taking Curtis Corner offline, moving 5th grade to the elementary school. And even though we may not see the facilities benefits of closing Southwood School, since it seems like we've already accepted those, we're moving preschoolers to the elementary schools, which increases the utilization of those facilities. So with all of that in mind, and recognizing that all of the other high-level changes that have much more community consensus and also have many fewer questions surrounding those decisions, it seems only natural that we would start with those changes and then down the road reevaluate whether or not it makes sense or may even be detrimental to close Wakefield School for our community. And with that in mind, I really do want to hold everyone accountable to the 5-year plan that we were given. Anything sooner than that is not what the constituents were told. That's not what Robert Hendricks spoke to us about, and it's not what was discussed in the school committee meetings. So with that said, I just again want to hold everyone accountable to the timing and recognize that not just the amount of time that's required, but the order of the changes makes a big difference in the decision moving forward. Thank you.
Hi, Emily Totten. I didn't prepare anything, so I always hate myself for getting up when I don't. But I understand that the itinerant schedule was taken off of the quote-unquote wish list because it was thought that people weren't getting up and speaking about it. I think a lot of people weren't getting up and speaking about it out of respect to people feeling like, there's a lot of stuff going on. So to get up and say, I'd like a language itinerant seemed out of place sometimes. So I'm up here to say that I do think that I would love to see it back in the budget. I don't know if that's going to happen for this year. If not, I'll come up to every meeting and stand up for an itinerant for everybody. I know you're trying to move it back down, getting it into 6th grade or something now, but I've also heard in the middle school level that it's, because it's an elective, it's extremely difficult to get in, maybe not extremely difficult, but it's not likely that you'll get those, even though you want language exposure, say in 6th or 7th grade, you likely may not get it until 8th or 9th. So I do think that's extremely important, especially for the schools that, in the classes that obviously don't have DLI in them currently. I have no idea how to move forward on this, but whatever. I've sat through a lot of meetings and listened to everybody speak, and it's, I'm glad I don't sit up there, is how I feel most of the time. But whatever happens and however it happens, I really hope that we can all find some way to hold hands and move forward. We are one community, and regardless, I've gotten up and said a couple of times at a couple of different meetings that regardless of which way it goes, my family's probably going to a different school. And that's scary and exciting, right? I recently reached out to a couple different PTOs to get together and do some stuff, and everybody was really excited because of all the kind of sadness around. Everybody was excited to work together on something. I don't know what that looks like or how to even start doing that, but maybe it does mean all the PTOs of all the schools getting together. If anybody wants to reach out to me personally and figure out how to do that, just to make it feel like we're more one community that really is where I know that we're all here for the best interest of the kids. And I really, that's it. So I don't know what that looks like, but I think it would be a great way forward. Thanks.
Andrew Laurie, I live up here in Wakefield. My family's lived here for about 400 years. And so I just want to say, it's a great spot to move to, right? And this place is awesome for many reasons. And one of the reasons is that school. Like you go down to downtown, you're going down Main Street, and you look across the river, and there's a school, and there's a flagpole, and there's the memorial. It's a great spot. You got the Nancy Brown. This is why my wife and I moved here, right? I mean, we were living in Narragansett at the time, but still, my mother's family was raised here, and like I said, 400 years. We came here for the school. We came here for that school on the hill. Now, there's a lot of people my age that I talk to, and I'm always saying how awesome this place is, and when they come to visit, they go, "This is your school?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's the school right there." And I'm not saying that the other schools aren't awesome, because they are, right? I mean, the scores down at Peacedale are amazing. Matunuck's right there on the water. West Kingston's out in the boonies where you can be all by yourself and no one's going to bother you. But Wakefield is like the town school, right? It's kind of like the beacon. And if you want more money in the budget, you're going to have more people with kids, young professionals, coming to this town. And that right there is an attractive thing. People are going to want to come here to raise a family because you can walk your kids to school. You can go down and you can visit the places and the different places to do your commerce. I mean, I go to Phil's every Friday, with my father-in-law. We go down there, we have some breakfast, we walk across the bridge, we feed the ducks. I mean, how creepy would it be if we have the water fire and people walk across the bridge and they go, "Oh yeah, there's the school that's closed down. It's that dude poops around the corner." I mean, you're going on the bike path, and on this side you got the cemetery, and on this side you got the closed down school.
Oh, you're a beacon of hope.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's a beacon of hope, right? That's what I'm saying. That school right there is a beacon of hope. That is what's going to get us more money into this town, because it's going to be where my daughter's growing up, right? That's her memories are going to be falling off that Nancy Brown swing set, right? It's going to be over there climbing on the Vietnam Memorial. It is Vietnam. Is it Vietnam?
Yes.
Right. I should know that. My dad was in Vietnam. I really should know that. But the point is that's what she's playing on. Those are going to be her memories. And I think a lot of people are really attracted to that. Young professionals or older professionals. Parents of awesome kids, right? And that's a great spot. And like I said, all the other schools are great spots. But that's a sell. That's a draw. That place right there. I mean, it got me from Narragansett. And Narragansett's pretty awesome, guys. Right? But that's the other thing. It's really close to Narragansett. Why would I go here and not East Greenwich? Well, because it's closer to the beach. And everyone wants to go to the beach. I'm talking too much. Point is, that place is a great sell. And you want to talk about 5-6 years in the future? Maybe we will have more kids coming here. Well, we won't if we close that school. I really think so. And you know what? Maybe it's not the most efficient school in the world, but I got to tell you, it doesn't have to be technologically awesome. I mean, it's a relatively wealthier community, and most kids probably have some kind of technology at home. But, you don't buy a 57 Chevy because it's got the best handling or the best engine. Like, you buy it because it's got some kind of nostalgia to it, right? It's this old town feel. You're walking down, you can walk everywhere. Hey, that's where the train station used to be, and now you can ride your bikes here, and you can go down there and feed the ducks, go for a little canoe ride. It's an experience, right? It's kind of an old-fashioned kind of thing, but also kind of new. It's got a lot going for it, and I think if we pull more for what we have, and instead of being afraid of what we might not have, we're going to be all right as a community. So I drank a whole thing of coffee before I came up. But,
we're awesome.
All right, thank you.
have any more comment, please?
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing to what that gentleman said. I think, sorry, my name is Ryan Meyer. Sorry, I'm speaking twice tonight. My grandparents have lived in Narragansett for 30, 40 years. My wife's family is third generation Narragansett. And when you speak to them about the peer development, the elders, my grandparents, her grandparents will always say they rushed that job. And that job had a huge negative impact on the downtown community. Even to this day, you'll hear people who were in that town council, in that committee say, it's hard to run a business in that. The whole development of that was done very hastily and very incorrectly, right? You can't reverse it. It's irreversible. And the bedrock of Wakefield is the downtown. Once this decision's made, you cannot reverse that. And it seems so inconceivable that we're going to rush this decision to try to do this and move this along so quickly. We don't have to look far to look at the long-term implication of that. So I think what this woman said earlier is give us the time. As community members, as business owners, give us the time. Don't make that same mistake and make a decision and just say, that's it, we're going to rush through this, because there's families, there's children, there's businesses at stake, and there's only one Main Street. There's only one Main Street. And we're going to throw this grenade and just make this decision and try to rush through it. It's look at that pier and talk to somebody who's 80 years old and ask them what was supposed to be done and how quickly it happened and how negative it was for those business owners and those community members. It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing.
I will open it up to any more comment from the public, and if there's none, I would defer the conversation back to the table.
Hi, that's always louder than I expect. I'm Chris Simpson from the Contemporary Theater Company. I live in town. Don't have any kids in the school system. Don't intend to have any kids in the school system. Still care about the school system. To make it really, just to summarize how I feel about all the things that everyone's made great points. We all agree that someone said they wanted to see everyone holding hands and on whatever happens. We've got that with closing Curtis Corner and with these other plans, Plan A on the original set of 4. And I recognize how difficult your decisions were, and I'm not trying to say oh, you didn't think about it. I know you did. I know how much work went into it. I talked to a lot of you. I care about, the community, and I'm involved in it. I know this was the decision you reached with good reasons, but clearly the community agrees with you on 90% of it, 70%, some big percent of it, and there's a lot of dissent and a lot of confusion around this other option. So let's do the thing that we need to do to meet those 20 points or whatever it is. Let's close the other schools. Let's move forward with your Plan A that you feel really good about. Let's have the work session that the Chamber and the WVA are advocating for, and let's take off the table the one thing that sounds like it could lead to people disenrolling their children now, teachers seeking jobs elsewhere, that might de facto make this decision in the immediate term, whether we like it or not. Let's get rid of that until such a time that we've explored the other options, made a plan. I've heard there are ideas about affordable housing or arts, whatever, all these good ideas about that spot. I don't know if they're going to work. I don't think so. I like the school there. That's my opinion. But let's spend 3 years exploring what we do with that building, have it ready to go if we ever make that closure, before we just close it and see what happens later. I don't think we should do those things, so I'm not advocating for them, but show me the plan. Show me how that's going to have a positive impact on the community, on the education, the budget. Let's look at it in depth and agree, putting a farm there or an arts complex or a 20-story affordable housing. I don't care, whatever it is, right? Show me why it works. Let's agree and do it. That's not going to happen in time for your deadlines for the state, and I get that, and I get why they're important, and I get why we want to save money for the taxpayers. So let's do what we can and just agree, ideally tonight, if not sometime soon, to leave the Wakefield closure until we've studied it, and then everyone will hold hands and agree with your great decision. And in 5 years, if we close the school, we'll hold hands then too. But for now, there's no reason to rush that. I haven't heard a single thing that says that has to happen now. So let's not do it. Please.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm going to make this very short. My name is Cadence Hansen. I'm also from Wakefield.
And I have a slightly different point of view yet again. And I'd like to try and return this back to a budget meeting. And I'd like that, I feel like the community doesn't entirely know about some of our budget shortfalls, some of these huge projects that we need to do to get our schools not up to 20th century, but into safety standards. And I think that it would be healing for the entire community if we could talk about what those things are and what, if we do change from option B back to option A, which of those projects are we going to have to put aside? And we might not have to, and that's fine. But I think that, as our school committee and as our town council and the people who have all the information, I would really like it, and I think the rest of the town would like to see that as well. If we could have that, just, I think it would be very, very healing for the entire town to know what we need to do. Everyone's saying that we're borrowing money for this, that, and the other, but I don't think people fully understand all of the budget shortfalls we've had in the past, all of the repairs that we put off for the last decade or 2 decades that really are coming due. So I think that if we make that more public and share that with the entire community, it might make some of these decisions a little bit easier. It might make it more understandable when we're looking to borrow the money from the state, because if you don't think we have any budget shortfalls, why do we need to borrow hundreds of millions of dollars? And at that, I really hope that we have some time now to talk about the budget, because that's what a lot of us came here for. Thank you.
Roland, I don't know if you can speak to this at all, but I think your meeting on the 24th, you have RGB coming to that meeting, correct? And they might have some more information about what the plans involve, because I know that it's not that we're not sharing that information. We don't have it yet. I think all the plans that were discussed and all the options were sort of big ideas, and we'll be, throughout this process, kind of zeroing in on the details and seeing how they work out. So the meeting on the 24th, I think, might have some answers for you.
Please state your name.
Mark Hutchison. I live in West Kingston. I just got a couple questions here. From my understanding, this entire process is here built on promises given to us by Governor Raimondo that we close a couple schools down, we get money back. How much do we have in guarantees that this actually happens? I mean, we are coming into an election year, no guarantees who's going to be in office afterwards. So we're basically going to blow a giant hole by closing down one of our schools. For how much of a guarantee that we actually get this money promised to us for this plan?
Mark, I don't think that's where this all came from. I think it came from another place. But during that process, some people have said we've been rushing through this. I mean, I think we've been talking about this for a year, unfortunately. So I don't think that we decided one day to close all the schools. It's more about the fact that if we're trying to become more efficient, enrollment has become an issue over the years. It's been going on for a long time, has never been addressed. We have schools that are not in good condition that we haven't spent money on. We have schools that have security issues, that people could easily walk in. Like one of my biggest things is I always feel like if I go to Curtis Corner, I could walk in and just run down the hallway. I don't think that's right. So this whole thing with the newer and fewer, we started our process before we were notified by the state that they were doing their process. So the Jacobs report just happened to come out at the same time our report came out at. But also, we're in a better place than most communities because a lot of communities haven't started talking about the big elephant in the room. And I can see where some people think it's about what we're going to be getting potentially from the state. It really isn't, but at the same time, if we have the ability and whatever decision that we make, if that decision can be offset a little bit about what the state's going to potentially give us in return, then we should take advantage of that, but it shouldn't be why we make that decision.
No, I get that, but as you said, it's still kind of a selling point. I mean, this is what you guys have been telling us is that, well, we'll get more of these things in here. And my question is, how much guarantee do we have that?
There is no guarantee. There isn't, and there never will be, no matter what we do, whether the school stays open or it closes. There is absolutely no guarantee. That's just the projection of the state funding formula. And really, truthfully, Gina Raimondo is at the helm, and she can stand up and say that, and which she did. It doesn't matter. The state funding formula is the state funding formula. It doesn't matter who's standing at the helm. This is a state project, a state projection, if you will. They could change it tomorrow. Anything can change.
Yeah, equally, you could say that if their guarantee falls through, then we don't have to go through with our plans. So, I mean, it's all hypotheticals that really don't need to be factored into this decision. Okay. And I would agree that most of the decision is probably not based on the bonding help that the state might lend.
One last point. Have you guys accounted for the fact that every sort of economic projection shows that municipal yields is going to go up over the next 3 years, which is going to increase the cost of borrowing? I didn't know how much that's been taken into account.
Certainly something we're monitoring, and yes, we're worried about the fact that rates are likely to increase in the out years.
They will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, Jonathan Daly LaBelle. First of all, I just want to thank you for the discussion. I want to build off of some of what's being talked about, because I'm hearing the state bonding as being a significant impact on this. And so, you don't think so? I mean, I keep hearing that the 35 is one thing, but if we can get to 55, that's the route to go. I just know that the state has a lot of broken promises. I don't think I need to tell anybody in Rhode Island that that's the case. So there's been a lot of promises made, and 10 plus years ago, when the economy cratered, the state was actually changing the budget promises in the middle of our budget years. So I think it's very risky to make this plan, start moving toward this plan. The economy looks good now, but we've been like probably 2 or 3 years of decent economic conditions, and we don't know what the future is going to be. Things that are happening in D.C. We already saw the budget going up, the deficit and the debt, and it seems to be continuing, and decisions made in D.C. are increasing that risk. And so just building off of some of the comment, that's going to build up the borrowing costs. So I think when speakers are coming up saying, well, we're closing the school, but then we're going to add on, there is going to be an impact. And then when we talk about the property tax, what people are paying, their affordability, I don't know. I haven't gone to the school committee meetings, but I've been following it fairly closely. I haven't heard that really being discussed. So I'd hope that really can be factored in moving forward. And then just working off of some of the affordable housing aspect, and not to get into the weeds on this, but I hope that the planning with the affordable housing, that they really will look at how and I think the town actually did the right thing. When they started the growth management 20, 30 years ago, I've said this, I brought this before, they absolutely did the right thing to try and control growth. It worked. But now maybe it needs to be eased up. And so if that's starting to be looked at, that sounds like a good way to go. But a lot of open space was bought, and there was a lot of encouragement of 55-plus housing, which Mark Levitt excluded, usually does not generate a lot of children in the school system. So I think if the town wants more families, and I'm a realtor, Bryant, we had Christian with the financing. I mean, in my opinion, the families, even though we're an aging population in general in this country, locally and in the state, the biggest demographic is still families. So if the town wants to open that up, they will come. And we could have a very different enrollment in 5 years if the town wants to go that route. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
If I may, Meg. Brian and I sit on the Contract Compliance Committee meeting, and we had a meeting with RIDE, I think it was back in December, to discuss this application and the process, and it was very early on in the stage for RIDE to be setting any guidelines or anything. But the point that they made to us was that we are way ahead of the game, South Kingstown is, in this process and in applying for the potential of getting more housing reimbursement based on these projects. And I think that really only applies, we can say for certainty, to this year because they've made commitments publicly and we'll see where it goes. But I do want to point out that at the school committee meeting that they had where they made this vote, we had State Representative Teresa Tanzi attend the meeting, and one of the things that she said that kind of stuck with me was, I'm telling you, I'm your state representative, you cannot rely on the state for anything. So I do think that that is a point, it's in the back of all of our minds. Certainly, I think this year we can apply and take advantage of everything that they've said that we can take advantage of, but we have no idea what's going to happen in 2 years, 3 years, who's going to get reelected, who's not. So I do think that's a fair point that we need to put into consideration.
And Jonathan, just to address two things that you pointed out, the controls that were put in place, I think back around 98, 99, 2000, have not, those triggers have not been hit for 18 years now, because I was actually building a house in 99 that the triggers hit. And as far as what gets built, I think the town has less to do with that than free market. I think that free market sort of dictates what kind of housing gets built for the most part. The town could have some control, but again, the triggers that were put in that limited building permits, I don't think those triggers have been hit for 18 years.
Darren Austin is my second take. I just want to share my anecdote. I know these decisions are based on budgets and data, but I know the emotional aspect of these things can be oftentimes useless, but I just want to share my experience. I grew up in Westerly. I left Westerly to go to college. I've traveled around the country. I lived in several different parts of the country. Down south, I've lived up north. I spent many years in Providence. I was a landlord, owned multifamily properties. When I met my wife in Providence, we were taken out of the area to California. She was pursuing a PhD degree. She works at URI now. But upon finishing her degree, we were searching specifically for a place to live. I wasn't prepared to go back to Westerly because the schools are not as well rated as South Kingstown. But this town and that school, there's just a sweet spot in terms of the taxation. I vowed never to live in Providence again. The taxes are absurd, and what you get for your dollar it was a terrible experience. We were thinking about the east side, but we came specifically here for what you have in terms of the beaches, everything that gentleman alluded to, feeding the ducks. This is such a unique thing. I've seen the entire west coast of California, all down south, the village living, where you don't have to get in your car. And I know dozens of families just up the street who are here for the same exact reason. Professionals who do pretty well, who pay their tax, fulfill their tax obligations, and they have come here just for this. It just fits in with the whole business community, the marketability of the town. It's tough to measure the price and the cost of this, but you take that school out of here, we wouldn't be here. And there's probably 10 or 15 other families right over there that would not be here if that school's not here. So I understand dropping enrollment numbers. There's lots of reasons for that. But if that school's not here, it's certainly not going to help enrollment numbers. And the village living, that I speak to younger kids at work. I'm in my mid-40s, but the millennials, there's a certain aspect and lifestyle that they're looking for, and this town has it. And it's going to have it as long as that school's here. And I got to go see my kids on that night.
Give them my best. If there are any other comments, I'll entertain them now. If not, I'll go back to the table with any questions or comments from either the school committee or the town council or our town manager or Dr. Stringfield.
Madam President, just one point of information here, because a lot of discussion has been had around the issue of the state enhanced reimbursement for housing costs. I think it's important to recognize that to the extent that that's in play at all, it's in play for a period of time that really is further out than I think folks may recognize. These 6 categories, the state currently reimburses housing costs, bonded housing costs, at a rate between 35% and 96.7%. Yeah, that's the current rate. The governor's proposal is to increase temporarily the rates of reimbursement, 5% additional for addressing health and safety deficiencies in buildings for construction that begins by 2023. Educational enhancements for science, technology, engineering, arts and math, STEAM, an additional 5% for projects that begin by 2023. Addressing severely deficient buildings, the additional 5% for that criterion is available for projects that start by 2024. The state is anticipating a longer time frame than the next 2 or 3 years. Now, there's lots of planning that has to go into that, but the construction for these projects is in 2023 and 2024 to be eligible. Now, obviously, if you start before that, you're eligible as well, but the anticipated time frame is not immediate, is my point.
Thank you. I can just piggyback on that to say that right now, I think Bryant and Abel spoke to this a little bit. The getting started is the big deal. It's not the finishing. So the getting started to get your application in there to be eligible, because I think Representative Tansey is correct that there is no magic window to say that the current state of affairs will be in our favor forever, but that doesn't mean your entire process has to conclude with the rapid rate that the community is worried about. I think it's important that you capitalize on the fact that you went through this very long study, and I think what you'll see from RGB on the 24th is a focus immediately on safety in all buildings, and that, I think, as folks have come forward and spoken about, that's important to everyone, but I think you're in a wonderful position now. If the entire process were to take until that 2022, 2023, I worry that we'd be at a disadvantage, but certainly starting, not necessarily completing, but starting, especially for those safety enhancements, will be important. And I think RGB, this is their business. So I've sort of counted the amount of times that folks have said, I'm not expert in this. Take advantage of RGB when they're here and ask them those specific questions of what has to come first. Can you build on Broad Rock, at a certain point? When does 5th grade need to move from their perspective? And then use that expert opinion and then inform it yourself for our community.
Providence. They're the architectural firm.
Any other
discussion at the table?
I just want a clarification, Roland. I was on the board of the chamber. I meant to bring this up earlier. I was on the board of the chamber until the end of 2017. I don't recall a focus group. I was on that board for 14 years. I don't recall a focus group that was involved with the planning process. In 14 years, I could have missed something. But
I know through planning for the contract compliance, we've heard updates about some of that. I don't know specifically about the focus group, but I was told by Robert there was a group there, and I know that there was extensive efforts to reach the non-stakeholders, the 8,000 residents that are 60 plus with no kids, the business community, the significant people, the groups of population that aren't directly connected to the school.
Thank you.
Happened on September 19th is what Marianne is reading.
Thank you.
So, Meg, I just didn't want to miss this opportunity because it's the budget hearing to thank you, Town Council, for passing our budget. I know this was the highest budget that we've gotten in as far as I can remember, so I wanted to say thank you to those of you who passed the budget. And I also wanted to speak a little bit to the Spanish itinerant, which, because it's not on this agenda, I do have an idea, and I have an idea for perhaps a free program that can come into the other schools that I'll talk a little bit about at that meeting on the 24th. And then I also have heard from so many people, and I think that it's important to recognize that this whole, we have not had, as people have said, we have not had a discussion since the vote took place. So all of this is all of this information and all of this continued feedback is valuable, and the discussion that I think will be robust amongst the school committee members is going to happen on the 24th. So I encourage everybody to come to that meeting.
I have a question for the town council, I guess. Specifically the affordable housing efforts and that type of thing. At any point, have we set a target number of units now that would be sub, say, 250 or sub 2,000 a month in rent? Is that
I don't believe any of that has happened as of yet. When we allocated the money, I think it's been over a year, we put an RFP out, and unfortunately we had no one take us up on the RFP. No, but recently, maybe you can speak to it, but the first time the RFP went out, there wasn't a response, right? Right.
Yep, there you go. Here's a target that the state sets for all municipalities. That target is 10%. We're currently at 5.6% of all of the housing units are affordable units in the town of South Kingstown. In order to address that and get the number closer to and exceed, preferably, the 10%, because that puts us in a much better position with regard to planning.
New permits or of total?
It's total units. So it's really, quite often it comes down to a question of, are these units deed restricted to low and moderate income households? But it's the number of units available for low and moderate income families. In order to address that, a study has been, an RFP has been put out on the street, and we will hear from a consultant who is giving the town council guidance soon on changes that could be made to the zoning ordinance in the town of South Kingstown to improve the ability of developers to build low and moderate income units.
And Robert, I was referring to the original RFP. Just
the original RFP went out with the idea of a study that would develop a wide range of strategies about how to attract developers and entice developers and promote the construction of low and moderate income units. That RFP, for whatever reason, just didn't garner anyone's interest, and the consulting community did not respond. So we've narrowed that request, or went out with a second request for proposals that addresses simply how do you change the rules, recommendations on how to improve the rules. That has received favorable responses, and I don't know exactly where we are in the contracting, but we're very close to, if we do you happen to know, Trish? We're very close to having selected a contractor for that.
And Roland, one more thing. One of the big things, the EDC had met with the town council a while ago. One of the big things that we're working on, and I think one of the things that could have a significant impact on attracting more affordable types of homes. And when I talk about affordable, I'm talking about there's affordable, what a lot of people can consider affordable, but there's also affordable where you can afford to live in our town. Do you know what I mean? So it's two different things in my mind. During that time, one of the biggest things that we talked about working on, and I believe we had some support, and I agree with it, is changing our density requirements, because that hurts us a lot when developers are looking to develop a particular property in certain zones, and it's not economically feasible for them to do that, because at the end of the day, the developer wants to make a profit.
So if we're talking about the number of units, then that we would need to make up to the 10%, can you put a number to that and a timeline of it? Is it?
Well, I don't think it's. Yeah.
Is when you go to Providence, when you go to Central Falls, when you go to Woonsocket. They are meeting the 10% criteria. There's nobody that is in suburbia that is even remotely close to that. It's going to be a challenge as people develop here in South Kingstown. Yes, when developers come in, they are actually told that they have to put 20%, if you will, into their project as affordable housing to help sustain and increase that. But we're not going to get there tomorrow. This
just no way.
I think your question, though, was a little bit different. Maybe I misinterpreted it. But what I was thinking was, if we look at all of our housing units in our town, currently, what's the percentage that are deemed affordable? I think you can actually come up with a number of how many housing units that we would need in our town to get to 10%.
That's a part of it. And then to what you said, I agree that how many of each year's new permits or new building permits are in this range, and what's that maybe order of magnitude? Is it 10, 20, 30, or is it 200, 300, or 400?
It's hundreds. It's not thousands.
I know, Roland, an obstacle we're facing too is I think it's 31% of South Kingstown is deemed open space, and we can change our density requirements, but we can't really infringe upon 31% of the space in South Kingstown to build on. So it's an enormous obstacle. But I think we are baby steps.
We also, though, still have about 30% of the town that can be developed. So, but at the same time, I think you have to look at the balance between land conservation and development.
31% is not enormous to have as protected space. I think that's another part of why South Kingstown is so special. I just wanted to say that.
I have a question for Roland or school committee or Kristen. I was just wondering if you can give an update on the bus situation that you acquired without an engine. And I was also wondering, I had a question about the pathways, but if you can update me about the bus.
So there is no change in the status of the bus. There are conversations to be had. Teresa Tansey is going back to the Rhode Island DOT on our behalf. We have approached some philanthropic organizations, but it doesn't look as hopeful as I thought 2 weeks ago. We're going to continue to do that. And
Kristen, how much money do you need for that?
about $30,000 we estimate for bus one. But of course, the concept has grown. Right. The vehicle physicality has lessened, but the concept has grown. So the more we pitch it to philanthropic organizations, the more ideas come about as to how the bus that doesn't exist can possibly be used. And so I feel like even when I get that one bus, it will be such a disappointment to other groups of people who now envision using it. So to be clear, my first priority is to transport parents that don't have access to reliable transportation to 504 meetings and IEP meetings and events that are critical for their children's education, such as parent conferences. The other wonderful ways that we could use a bus would be our second tier, which is to transport students to internships. We are growing, if you're following our Facebook page, opportunities at the high school, partnerships with probably lots of good folks in the audience to place our kids in out-of-school settings to do this internship. And it would be wonderful to be able to transport kids, particularly kids who, again, don't have access to their own family transportation. There's also become a sentiment for kids who want to take classes in other schools. So if we have middle school kids who want to take classes at the high school, elementary kids who want to take classes at the middle school, that has become another great idea that we'd like to offer. So if anyone in the audience owns a car dealership and would like to help out, then please contact us. Do we have a deal for you?
Two more questions. When I heard about the Career and Technical Pathways program, I was really excited. And I know that part of that is a CNA program and carpentry and sort of that focus. And I'm wondering, are our facilities up to date enough to support programs like that? And if they're not, what's the timeline look like for bringing those sort of up to snuff? Because I'm just imagining having CNA classes in some of the labs that we have, and if they meet the guidelines or the requirements that you need.
So that sort of goes to underscore another advantage to starting at least the high school improvements sooner rather than later. My preference would be safety first and high school improvements in order to complement and be able to grow our career and technical programs. I think we are one of the schools who has the most Career and Technical Center applications in, thanks to our high school principal, our STEM coordinator, our assistant principals and teachers at the high school who've worked really, really hard to get this going. They've also written many grants, and so one of the grants that's out there is for a CNA lab. But in the meantime, South County Hospital has been very, very generous and gracious and said that we can use their labs. And so that's a very nice piece. We're grateful to the connection there, but we would like to beef up our CTE, and that will also give us points.
And then my final question is, notwithstanding the potential referendum on bonding for some of these projects that we've been discussing, do you expect that any of this legacy planning that we've done or any of the options that you've discussed or moves that you've made is going to impact the budget for next year in any significant way, either higher or lower?
How so?
Well, I mean, sure. So, I mean, we've talked about these long-range plans, and I'm sure over the next 6 months or so, you guys are going to commit to more plans. And I just wasn't sure if you had a feel for how you felt it was going to affect next year's budget, if at all, or if we really would just be looking until the potential referendum for bonding before we would see any fiscal impact.
I think, are you talking operational budget or capital budget?
Anything.
So I think that you're going to see us continue with the capital budget that you approved, which is talking about the HVAC program this summer for Matunic, the HVAC program for West Kingston, the roof projects that have already been put in motion. What you're taking off the table is certainly, I'll give an example of the parking lot rezoning and engineering study for Curtis Corner School. But there will be safety improvements made to Curtis Corner School, made to all the schools. And so there will be some ebb and flow in that. In terms of our operational budget, then I totally envision the town council being as generous every year to us as they have this year, and I don't have the same faith in the state being as generous.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess, something similar. I think we're going to continue investing in our schools, and we're going to continue needing support from the town council. Count on that.
I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who came out tonight, and I know we got pretty far afield from maybe the budget that we're considering passing, but it was good to hear from all of you, and I think the school committee has some stuff to think about, as we all do. You know, I think there are two sides to the story. Of course, we heard one side very strongly here. The school committee still does have to take into consideration, you know, the declining state funding that we've been seeing for a decade, and taking into account, you know, perhaps not bottomless pockets of our taxpayers here. So it's been great, and I look forward to the work session that we set up. I think we can have more of that discussion then. And thank you to the school committee, and I'll make that motion to adjourn now.
Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting adjourned at 9:34.
You got another survey?
Did you get my? I did. Yes. I was like,